Hey, so today we're talking about 4 affordable scotches that can help you kickstart your whiskey journey, that are approachable but still quite complex. Maybe you have tried a few whiskies at a bar or something with ice and stuff. You're ready to start building your little collection. You're just not sure which ones to go for. I know when I was first getting into whiskey, you go down to the bottle store, you go down to the supermarket, there's just so many different whiskies. A lot of them are just really expensive. So grab a dram, grab a seat, and let's Welcome to First Fill. I'm Phil and I'm going to fill you in about whiskey. First thing I want to say is that I don't want to prescribe your journey. There are actually so many whiskies. There are probably 100 I could probably put on the list. The reason these ones on the list are the whiskies I actually currently have on my collection that I also think will work for you. And one of the other things about, when people say, oh, what whiskies should I start out with, or what's the best whiskey, is that what I wish someone had told me when I was first getting into whiskey is that whiskies are for different moods. Some whiskies are better on a hot day. It's summer. You want something light, sort of fruity, and something maybe you can have with ice. And then maybe in winter it might be a completely different mood. It's dark, you're in a little cottage, it's raining outside, and you want something a bit smoky. There's if you're socializing, there's if you're trying to break the whiskey down, more complex ones. Lots of different moods. And so for each of these whiskies, I'm going to talk about, what kind of mood I would normally have this whiskey in. But, as I said, I don't want to prescribe your journey. Just enjoy it how you want to drink it. So let's get into the first whiskey. Number 1, Glenlivet 12-year-old. So the Glenlivet 12-year-old is a really good starting whiskey, approachable whiskey. When you first get into whiskey, and affordable, it's available in a lot of places. It's also a good whiskey, say you're starting your whiskey night, it's not too intense in any sort of direction. So it can kind of also prepare your palate for the next whiskies coming out. I know there's a perception out there that Scotch is smoky. Well, it's actually only a tiny, tiny bit of Scotch, and the majority is not. All right, the stats. Region, it's from Speyside, Scotland, which is in the sort of central north part. Glenlivet was one of the big first distilleries in Scotland. The next stat is the cask. So this is called the double oak because, as it says, it's matured in European oak and American oak casks. Now when you see the phrase American oak casks, generally it means it's from ex-bourbon casks. So these will be American oak casks where they had aged bourbon, and then European oak, it doesn't say, but generally my assumption is that it's probably been aged in an ex-sherry cask from Spain. But it could be anywhere, it could be French wine or anything. But that's, in terms of like the most common thing, when I see European oak, that's kind of the direction I would think it is. And you'll see in my casks video kind of, what does that mean? Like, how does it impact flavor? Go watch that, it's good fun. The next stat is 12 years, so 12 years in a cask. And remember, this doesn't mean that all the whiskey in here is 12 years old. There could be whiskey in here that is 30 years old, but by Scotch law, the youngest whiskey in the bottle is what they have to put on the age statement. So this is 12 years, which is a good amount of time sitting in the cask to tame down that spirit. ABV is 40%. Personally, I kind of prefer 46% and sort of up, because I think you get more flavor from the whiskey. But as I'm recommending this as kind of a starting whiskey, 40%, which is quite an approachable strength for when you first get into whiskey. It's not going to sting too much on those sinuses, sting too much in your throat. It's just going to be nice and clean. You can have it with ice, you can have it neat in a glass. And I still love this whiskey. As you can see, it's going down quick. And what about the mood? What kind of mood would I drink this whiskey in? So it's really one in the middle for me. Generally, this is one I would kind of start the night with. Maybe if I'm having friends around, I'm going to be a bit distracted and we're kind of talking, but I still want a whiskey that tastes quite good, got a good nose. Let's try a little bit. Oh, is there a better sound than this when drinking whiskey? Maybe the sound of pouring the whiskey. It's quite a good sound as well. I've just uploaded another video, or I might upload this one first. If I have uploaded it, it'll be up here. here, how to taste whiskey. And it kind of just goes through how to nose it and how to taste it to help you kind of bring out some of those flavors. You know, sometimes you see people go, oh, it's got all these flavors, and you're like, what? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have freshly cut grass. I don't know, it smells like alcohol. And it does seem like that when you first get into whiskey. But as you go through and you experience it and you learn more flavors and you get past kind of that stage, you'll start to get into new flavors. Anyway, nose. So in this one, I'm definitely getting lots of kind of orchard fruit, a lot of ripe fruit, a bit of citrus, apples, pears, pineapple, and a little bit of strawberry. And it's got kind of this base as well of like vanilla as well. And I think there'll be a lot of the oak coming through. On the palate. Now palate just means taste, you know. How does it taste? Just another fancy word. It's dry, acidic, honey, toffee, ginger, and yeah, you're getting that same vanilla from the oak casks. Like the nose, the palate is quite mellow and it's quite well-rounded, but it's not boring. I'm also getting like the top of a, you know, tiramisu, that kind of glazed bit on top, like a little bit of that. And the finish, and finish just means, you know, the taste after you swallow, you know, as it comes back through, and those extra little smells, and also how long it's holding. This one, I'd say it's a short to medium finish. I don't think it's holding for a really long time, but it's holding a little bit. So the next whiskey I would recommend is the Auchentoshan 12-year-old. Now the Auchentoshan 12 is kind of one that's a bit special to me. I remember having like the Glenfarclas 10 and stuff and really thinking, I'm just not sure if I'm really into whiskey. And it wasn't until I had the Auchentoshan 12-year-old and I thought it was really good. And especially when my palate was starting out, it didn't sting like some of the other ones did. I don't drink so much of it these days, although I've drinking a lot of this one, as you can see. The region is lowland malt. Now this is one of the few remaining lowland malts. I think there might be a few more coming up, being built, but currently it's only a few of a handful that are still in that region. This is also a 12-year-old, good decent age, gives it a good amount of time to really bring out some of those flavors from the cask and tame down that spirit. ABV, this is also 40%. Again, I generally like something that's a bit higher because you get a bit more flavor, but for you starting out, 40% is super approachable. And the mood, I mean, again, I'd kind of put this in the same category as the 12-year-old Glenlivet, because I mean, it's probably not a winter whiskey. There's definitely a lot of other whiskies that I would prefer in winter. It's a great all-rounder. You can have it in summertime, spring, autumn. You could put it on ice if you want. You could probably even have it with an old-fashioned. So the nose. So for this one, I'm getting a lot of tropical notes. You're getting a lot of that pineapple, mango. You're getting sort of woody notes. When I say woody, it's sort of that kind of more nutty kind of taste. And I'm definitely getting almond. Yeah, that citrus, mandarins, honey, and then sort of like a sweet caramel. And then floral notes as well. And on the palate, so I find this whiskey actually really well balanced. Yeah, it's decent at the front, it's decent in the middle, and it's got a decent finish as well. None of it's kind of extreme. It's not as sweet as some of those Speyside whiskies. One thing about this whiskey is it's triple distilled, and triple distilled was something that was very common in Irish whiskey. So if you're into Irish whiskey, this might be a great place for you to start with Scotch whiskey, but also just a great entry point for people getting into Scotch. Whiskey number 3. So I've taken you around kind of Scotland a bit. You know, we've been to Speyside, we've been to Lowlands, and now we're at Islay with the Ardbeg 10-year-old. Now, some people say you shouldn't really drink smoky whiskies when you're getting into whiskey, and I kind of disagree, because maybe it's a generational thing. You know, a lot of millennials now have had lots of international food, and the smoky part of the whiskey might not be the bit that turns them off. You know, the bit that's kind of intense and takes a while to get through could be the sharp alcoholic content that just takes practice. And that was the case for me. When I first had smoky whiskey, I really enjoyed the smoky part. Smoky whiskey is kind of one of those things that kind of can push you away or draw you in. And some people, their first experience with Scotch could be smoky and they could go, ooh, I don't like this, and they go away and they don't realize there's really nice sweet whiskies and light whiskies like the Glenlivet 12 and the Auchentoshan 12. There's a couple other smoky whiskies that also could work when you're starting out, like the Lagavulin 16 or the Laphroaig 10. My favorite personally is the Port Charlotte 10, but I think the Ardbeg 10 is very accessible, can be decently priced. It's a great whiskey to start out with. So let's go to the stats. This is from Islay, the Isle of Islay. Great little island where a lot of other smoky distilleries are. Not all, there are some whiskies not smoky, like the Laddie from Bruddock and the Bunnahabhain 12. Generally most of the distilleries there have an expression of smoky whiskey. So the age is a 10-year-old. 10's a good age for smoky whiskey because when smoky whiskey's been aged too long, it's the first flavour to kind of disappear is the smokiness and the peatiness. It's been in the barrels long enough to get that complexity, but also not push away that smokiness. So that's why I would say to you, don't be turned off by young whiskies, especially young smoky whiskies, just because they're young, like the Lagavulin 8-year-old. Young age, great whiskey. ABV, now this one is bottled at what I like is the 46%, so it can be quite intense for some people's palates, but you know, just add water to it and work out how you want to drink it and what level of alcohol you prefer it at. The mood. Now, this is a great whiskey I'd finish the night with. If I was having a night with these three, this would be the one I'd finish the night with. Be a great one in winter, great one to put into a little flask, take tramping or hiking. I have seen people put this in cocktails and it can be pretty good. Personally, I like it by itself most of the time, but just drink the whiskey how you like to drink it. I would say, so on the nose, first thing that sticks out is that peatiness. You get a little bit of that peat, smokiness, log and a log fire kind of thing. You're also getting like sort of a baked apple note, sultanas, pear, banana, ginger, and definitely pepper, fresh ground pepper. And on the palate, so you're definitely getting that pepper note, you're getting the banana note again, but ginger. The back of the throat feel is quite intense. Not so much on the front palate, but in the middle of the palate, you're getting sort of like a slight kind of burn across there. Finish, so you get a little bit of that kind of smoke again, ginger. But what I'm getting is kind of like a tea, the Chinese oolong tea, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Getting a bit of that as well. Now the fourth whiskey I would like to recommend is the Bunnahabhain 12. So probably don't shake up your whiskey like that. Confession is that there's actually no whiskey left in this. Completely empty. But I want to recommend it. The good thing about this whiskey is that it's also an Islay whiskey, but it's not peated, so it's not going to be smoky like the Ardbeg. And I think it's a brilliant, underrated kind of whiskey to start out on. The cask, I don't think it tells me the casks, but I suspect that it is an ex-sherry casks and ex-bourbon casks. It is aged 12-year-old, so same as the Auchentoshan and the Glenlivet. It's bottled at 46.3%, which is a good bottling strength to get out all the flavour, and its natural colour and unchilled filtered, which it has written on the bottle. So the mood for this one is kind of decently rich and complex, but it's also an all-rounder as well. I think it's one you probably could pick apart a bit more than maybe these two. A great one to kind of smell and taste with a mate and kind of go through that flavour profile of what you're getting, and yeah, good fun. I don't currently have any whiskey, but I have taken some notes. The big one I remember on the nose and the palate is the Bunnahabhain's dried fruit note. There's a lot of raisins, dates. So were definitely the biggest notes I was getting from this whiskey. A little bit of orange, it was malty, slightly sweet. Definitely try some of this whiskey. So I hope you found this video helpful, and hopefully it gives you a launching off point about all the different types of whiskies you can try and all the different flavors you can get. But if you liked the video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, and maybe ring the bell, because I can be a bit frequent with these videos. But above all, share and enjoy. Beauty.